Hi, this is Shauna from the Foil Fox. I'm so glad you're joining me today on the Paper Tray Ink and Ink to Paper YouTube channel. And I have a new project using some items from the latest release, the most current. This one is the Feather Friends Mini 9 with its stamp set and, of course, its matching die. It does have this. It's a wonderful woodpecker type bird. And then I'm using some favorites. This is Antique Wishes that does this wonderful frame. It has a background stamp and plus a detail stamp. We'll be using the detail stamp today. And then it has a matching die that cuts out not only the border, it does cut out some leaves as well, but it also embosses a pattern onto the border. And then I'm using Brighter Days, that piece of foliage right there, because I really like that one. And I'm going to be cutting it out using the matching die set if I can get this crazy die set out. And I'm using that one foliage piece there. And then I'm also using Sprigs and Sprays, which has some wonderful flowers and twigs and things in there. And I'm going to be using, there's two panels. I'm going to be using most of them from this one panel. And then of course I'm going to be cutting them out with the die so you can see all the pieces on the back there. And here is the die that cuts out all of those pieces. But to get started, I'm going to be using a piece of white cardstock, a panel A2, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, some plum pudding, and then also some Bristol paper. With the white cardstock, I have mounted up that Antique Wishes frame into my stamp positioner, and I'm inking it up with soft stone. All of the inks I'll be using today are Paper Tray ink cubes, and I do spritz it every time. And that's one of the reasons why I use Bristol paper, is that it's a little bit more tolerant of water, but also it blends the ink colors a little better. It does give you that kind of watercolory look to it, which I like very much. You don't notice it much in this frame, but you will when we do the bird. So I've inked that up twice because soft stone is a soft color. I'm going to use the die, and I'm going to make sure that it's on there very straight as with the stamping, and I'm going to cut that out, and you can see what it looks like up against my plum pudding background that I'm going to be using. But I'm going to set that aside for now, and I'm going to work on the bird. I've put the main piece in the stamp positioner again. I find it much easier to do when you're using a stamp positioner because you can get the stamps in the exact right place. You can take your time doing it and then stamp it. But I'm going to start at the head with some yellows using some bright buttercup, some summer sunrise, and then I'm going to go down with a little bit of autumn rose, and then going to plum pudding and royal velvet. Now, I don't know if mine is mismarked or is that's just the way it is, but plum pudding is my darkest color. And I'm just stamping that. I do want that tail feather to be quite dark, and so I will stamp that a little bit darker, but also I'm going to add some more yellows and the autumn rose, and just kind of smooth out all of these colors for the body of the bird. This is the majority of the bird. And then I didn't like this transition right here, so I have a wet brush, and I'm just kind of smoothing out those inks. I'm not adding anything right now, but now I think I'm going to smush some bright buttercup on my glass mat here, and I'm just going to add a little with my paintbrush and paint that in just a little, just to give a little bit more brightness and smoothness to it. And now I'm going to use, there's this piece that makes kind of vertical stripes in the head, and I want them to be quite subtle but still see them, so I'm using Harvest Gold, and I'm going to ink that up, and I'm spritzing each time. Might use a little bit of the Summer Sunrise just to get it to blend a little bit here with the rest of the body. Now each time I take a stamp and I lay it down very carefully to make sure that it's all lined up properly, and then close the lid, and now I've got it in perfect position. So here's the wing, I've got lined up, and the top of the head. And I'm going to ink it up, and I'm using some autumn rose, some berry sorbet. That was a nice color to add to it. I'm going to use some plum pudding and some royal velvet. For the top of his head, I'm using primarily summer sunrise and a little bit of the bright buttercup. On that wing, I want it to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to add a little bit more of these. I will add a little bit more yellow or orange to the top of his head as well. But I want the tip of this, or the bottom of his wing there, to be closer to the tail feathers. Maybe not as dark, but that's where I'm using the royal velvet and the plum pudding to just darken up this wing color. And I always blend it with my finger if I think I have some harsh lines. And then I do spritz it each time so that I get a good transition there. And I get good coverage, saturation with the ink. Now I'm going to do his beak. I'm using honey walnut, and I'm also doing his little feet, which are in true black. So he's coming together very nicely. Now I just need to add some of this detail to his wing. I'm going to use some plum pudding there. There's actually two pieces for his wing, and then there's one for the tail feather. And the tail feather I will use my darkest color. And then for that little breast part, I think I'm going to end up using berry sorbet. I experimented with a few of them, but I think berry sorbet is the one where you'll actually see those little feather markings. And now for his eye, there are two stamps for his eye. I have more success in just drawing it in with a micron marker, but you can certainly stamp it in, and I'm just using a white pen there just to give it a little bit of highlight. Then I'm going to cut it out with a matching die. Now set that aside, and I'm going to go on to my sprigs and sprays and my bright days. I've taken the bright days, the one foliage piece, and then the other pieces are from the sprigs and sprays. So, and then I'm keeping all this negative space because you've seen me do this before. I'm going to mount it in my stamp positioner, and you'll see on the far right is the piece that is from Brighter Days, and the rest of these are all from sprigs and sprays. So that piece I just put in is from Brighter Days. And I'm actually going to stamp, I think, a few more of these, but I'm just going to demonstrate these main pieces. As you probably know, I like to have a few extras if I need to, because I might need them. I don't know quite what my design's going to turn out with yet. And then I'm going to take those twigs right here. This is from Sprigs and Sprays. All the rest of these are all Sprigs and Sprays. That very first stamp was from Brighter Days. And I'm just laying them in there, and I'm making sure they're all lined up. This is the easiest way, especially when you've got ones that are easy for you to cut off part of it if you don't have it exactly in the right position, if you stamp it and then cut the die out. So I like to cut the die and then stamp it. I can lay it over perfectly, and then I'm not cutting anything off. So I'm going to start out with the twigs. I'm using cocoa bean. For this is going to take a few stampings, but this is going to give me my nice kind of twiggy tree there. I do spritz it each time because I do want to have that ink move a little bit and give me a really nice impression, which it does. I'm going to take that out, and as I finish them, I'm going to set them aside, take them out and set them aside. Next, I'm going to do with spring moss. I'm doing the ones on the far end, and then I'm doing the sprig from Brighter Days, and I'm using the greens that I'm using here. I'm going to use a combination of them, but the greens that I am using are ripe avocado, um, ocean tides, a little bit of pine feather, and a little bit of new leaf. But I do like to give a little variation to the leaves because not every leaf is exactly the same color. And then I use spring moss for that first part of the flower that you'll see. I'll stamp the pink flowers. That one these are where the pink flowers are. I'm using Sweet Blush and a little bit of Lovely Lady for a little bit of darkness. But you can see the stem of that is spring moss. Now I did 2 more of those just so that you know, off camera. So you might want to do a couple of those if you want to do this design. And now I'm using, for these long pieces, I'm going to be using the same greens. I like little dashes of, a yellowish green in there. I like some darker colors. So I do use a combination and kind of dot them around. So again, I'm using the new leaf and a little bit of ripe avocado and pine feather and spring moss. If you want to, you can certainly cut down the colors. I just happen to use a lot of colors when I do this. Now I have all those pieces cut out, and you can see I have more of them. And I have a vintage cream card base. And I have this plum pudding panel that you've seen before. And I'm going to mount that on top of my vintage cream card base. It's slightly smaller to the card base when folded. I just want a little bit of that white showing. And then I put foam tape on the back of my Antique Wishes frame that we had made previously. And I'm going to put that down and position that, center that. Now we have a nice framework for our design. Now I put just a little bit of foam tape on these twigs and then a little bit of glue at the bottom, and that's going to give me my foundation. And then from there I'm going to take all these pieces that I have, and I'm just going to kind of place them here and there and kind of get an idea how I want it to go. This is one of the hardest things for me to do because I can never make up my mind exactly how I want it to look, and so I'm always fiddling with this. So just kind of bear with me. Right now I'm not gluing them down until I get an idea exactly where I'd like to have them. Just kind of just positioning them around, and then with my bird there. So I think that I'm going to go with this actually, and I have foam tape on the back of my bird. And my other pieces, I'm going to just stick my bird down, and then my other pieces I'm just going to glue down with Tombow glue. And you'll see that I have them positioned this way, but I'm going to go back and change them just a tiny bit. But I did a sentiment using the Appreciation Mini stamp, just sentiment stamp, and stamped Sincerest Thanks. That sentiment was stamped using plum pudding ink, and here you see it all put together here. I just love this bird series. This is, like I mentioned, Feather Friends Mini 9, and you can, even though he's a woodpecker, you can do him in so many different colors as you can see here. I really hope you enjoyed this project, and I'm so glad you joined us. If you did, please give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And pop over to blog.inktopaper.com. Check out the supply list there and lots of inspiration. And you can always also do the same at foilfox.com. We have all the supplies there as well, and we have tons of inspiration there, as well as a complete supply list. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Bye.